Migration is the first time most organizations see their real permission model. Most do not like what they find. In earlier videos in this series, we covered what migration requires from the delivery and planning side. This video covers what it requires from the compliance side. Specifically, the 3 access control categories that every migration forces to the surface, whether the team is ready for them or not. SharePoint migration is not just a technical event, it is an audit. When you move content from an on-premises environment to SharePoint Online, you are forced to make explicit decisions about permissions that the source environment allowed to accumulate implicitly for years. Unique permissions on individual documents, access breaks that nobody documented, security group memberships that were set by someone who left 3 years ago. These decisions were deferred during the years the source environment was running. The migration forces them all at once. What surfaces is not new. It was always there. The migration makes it visible, and visible means accountable. 3 access control categories surface in almost every migration I have architected. Each one requires a deliberate design decision before the content moves, not a cleanup task after it arrives. First, item-level permission accumulation. In aged SharePoint environments, item-level unique permissions accumulate over years. A document shared with an external consultant 4 years ago. A folder locked for a project that closed 2 years ago. A library where every document has its own distinct access list. When this content migrates, one of 2 things happens. The migration tool attempts to preserve the item-level permissions and partially succeeds, leaving some content with incorrect access. Or the tool resets permissions to library inheritance and wipes 4 years of intentional access decisions. Neither is acceptable without a review. The review question before migration. For each item with unique permissions, is that permission still intentional and correct? If yes, it must be explicitly migrated and verified. If no, clean it up before the content moves. The item level permission review is the step I get the most resistance on. The resistance is always the same. It will take too long. My response is also always the same. The review before migration is a structured one-time process. The review after migration, when permissions have been reproduced incorrectly in a live production environment that users are accessing, is an unstructured, ongoing process with no clean endpoint. I have done both. The pre-migration review for a mid-size environment typically takes 1 to 2 weeks with the right business owner participation. The post-migration remediation on a comparable environment has taken 3 to 6 months. Second, external sharing state. SharePoint on-premises external sharing was often configured at the organization level with limited visibility into what was actually shared externally. SharePoint Online exposes external sharing with full auditability, and a compliance team that was not previously aware of the external sharing scope will be aware of it the moment the content lands in SharePoint Online. Before migration, pull a complete external sharing report from the source environment. Classify each external share as still valid, expired, or unauthorized, and resolve each one before the content moves. Resolving 40 external sharing decisions in a controlled pre-migration review takes a week. Resolving a compliance inquiry about unauthorized external access after go-live takes significantly longer. The external sharing audit produces a different reaction depending on who sees it. IT sees a list of sharing events. The compliance team sees a list of potential violations. I require both in the room when the audit results are reviewed. The decisions about which shares are valid, expired, or unauthorized are business decisions, not technical ones. IT cannot make them unilaterally. The compliance team needs to see the full picture before migration happens, not after it lands in SharePoint Online, where the sharing state becomes visible to a much broader set of monitoring tools. Third, audit log continuity. Many organizations in regulated industries have compliance obligations tied to content access history. SharePoint on-premises audit logs do not automatically migrate. When the source environment is decommissioned, those logs are at risk of being lost. Before any SharePoint migration in a regulated environment, the audit log retention strategy has to be designed explicitly. How long are source audit logs retained? Where are they stored after source decommission? And how does SharePoint Online audit logging pick up going forward? This is not a question the migration team can answer independently. It requires a conversation with the compliance function before the migration timeline is finalized. The audit log retention design has a technical component most teams underestimate. SharePoint on-premises audit logs are often stored in the SharePoint content database, which means they are not automatically backed up to a separate location. When the source environment is decommissioned, the audit logs may be decommissioned with it unless the retention strategy was explicitly designed before the migration. I have worked with 2 organizations that discovered their audit log gap during a regulatory examination, not during migration planning. Both cases required reconstructing access history from alternative sources. Neither reconstruction was complete. Item level permission review, external sharing classification, audit log continuity. 3 access control categories that the migration forces to the surface. None of them are migration problems. They are governance problems that the migration makes impossible to defer. Addressing them after it arrives is a remediation project in a live production environment under compliance scrutiny. I scheduled the compliance review for these 3 categories as a mandatory step in the migration planning timeline. It blocks the first content migration batch. That sequencing creates the right pressure. The compliance decisions have to be made before the migration proceeds, not while it is in progress with half the content already moved.